Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. To celebrate my channel passing the 100 subscribers mark, I have managed to borrow an old obscure adventure for today's retro review, The Horrible Secrets of Monhegan Island for Call of Cthulhu 2nd edition by Grenadier Models Inc. Also, I need to say thanks to my friend Neil for letting me borrow his copy of this for the review. Okay, first a bit of history. The Horrible Secrets of Monhegan Island is a 48-page scenario that was released in 1984 to promote Grenadier's 25mm figure range for use with Call of Cthulhu. First up's the cover. The cover art is weirdly rubbish. I'm not sure if this is meant to be depicting deep ones emerging from the ocean, as one of them appears to have jeans on. Okay, to the inside. On the first page we are greeted with special thanks, which includes Zippy the Wonder Porpoise, which upon research I couldn't find any reference to. If anybody knows what this means, please let me know in the comments. First up is the Keeper's Information section. Monhegan Island is off the coast of Maine and has been settled since 1692. The residents shun contact with the outside world. It was first settled by Englishman Roger Martinson, who left for there on the basis of religious persecution. Unknown to the outside world, Roger was a worshipper of Father Dagon and Mother Hydra, who felt that he had been saved from a shipwreck by them for unknown reasons. He went on to try and convert as many people as he could to their worship. He succeeded in gathering a large group of fisher folk around his cause and set off to the New World and landed on Monhegan Island on June the 15th, 1692, a date thereafter held sacred, where two people are given to the Deep Ones to take to Father Dagon and Mother Hydra as tribute. The horrific gifting ceremony was believed to ensure bountiful fishing harvests for the settlers. This ceremony continued annually until less than 100 years after it began. The islanders realised that it was destroying the population of the young men and women of the island. This concern drove Richard Martinson in 1778 to start using outsiders from the mainland. Victims were lured to the island and sacrificed in the foul ceremony. Loners and outcasts were generally chosen so that nobody would notice or care, and this use of outsiders only reinforced the islanders' fear and hatred. The year the scenario takes place is 1924. And the last remaining Martinson, Roger, had until 2 years ago never conducted the ceremony after his grandfather Alan died without passing on the correct information on how to perform it. Initially this filled the islanders with the dread of retribution, but as the years passed without incident, and indeed their catch yield increased, fears were cast aside. 4 years ago, however, this all changed. The yield was poor for 2 years straight and the islanders demanded the ceremony take place, and Roger, fearing the possibility of an angry mob, agreed. Roger consulted the book which contained the ritual but couldn't read it because it was in Latin, so he sent the book to the mainland to be translated. Although the translation was correct, there was more in the ceremony than was actually required. When it was changed in 1778 to include outsiders, it was altered to delete the requirement of a young girl from the island to act as a sea nymph for the ceremony. Originally, a young girl was given a herbal drink which would make her fall into a trance, and in that state she would call deep ones out of the ocean. Unfortunately for the girls, the trance never wore off and would kill the girls within 3 years. It was this that caused Richard Martinson to change the ceremony. At this point in time, Roger has unwittingly reinstated that part of the ceremony, and the current islanders don't remember what happened to the girls previously, as it was so long ago. The last two girls who acted as sea nymphs now both live in Roger's house and live a docile, empty existence. In the year that the scenario begins, the authorities were notified on June 2nd, 1924 of a Sarah Goodwin going missing. The state of Maine sent a police inspector to the island, who upon finding clothing on the beach, decided that she had drowned even though no body was recovered. Roger Martinson has contacted the mainland police to ask them to send investigators to the island, as he believes Sarah was murdered. This is a ruse to get more outsiders to the island to sacrifice them in the ceremony. The scenario begins with the investigators being hired by Inspector E. Samuel Hawkins. He explains the situation and that Martinson has agreed to pay them $30 a day and give them lodging during their stay. They're given until June the 14th to perform any pre-investigative work, upon which they will be met by Martinson's chauffeur and butler, Alan Krebs, who will then take them to the island on Martinson's yacht. We're then given a handy timeline of events leading back from 1692 to the present day, the statistics for Hawkins and Krebs and a map of the coast of Maine. When the players arrive at the island's docks, they are greeted with local fishermen repairing nets, an 18th century architecture that has not been updated. As they journey through the village, they endure stares from the locals, who have the distinct look of generations of inbreeding. They travel in a fairly out-of-place car to Martinson's house, a large 2-storey structure, where they are welcomed by Martinson and the previous two sea nymphs, Angela Blackwood and Brandy Collier. Martinson invites them to have dinner with him and to have a look around his home, but to treat any locked doors with respect. If the players investigate the library, they can find a number of occult and mythos tomes that Martinson doesn't know are there. Should the investigators decide not to eat with Martinson and the girls, they can get a meal and cold stares in the local inn, the Fishtail. But this is a vomit-inducing affair and may even cost the investigators their watch or other valuables. If the investigators search the island, there are some places of interest. They can find the blood-stained stone slab used for the ceremony, and in the woods, the shack of a local misfit, Matthew Falconer. They can also encounter a group of small children in the woods who can give the players some cryptic clues as to what is going on. The following evening, Martinson puts his plan into place to lure the investigators to the ceremony. He creates a noisy scene late in the evening that he hopes will encourage them into following him and the girls. If they stay at his home, they are bushwhacked by a group of islanders with nets. If they decide to follow him, they are led to the site of the ceremony, where they not only have to fight off the islanders, but the group of deep ones that have been summoned. If the investigators survive, they have to make their way off the island by convincing Krebs that they need to take the yacht. There's a batch of maps in the centre pages, as well as the stats for everyone and everything involved, and we lastly have a section on possible spin-off scenarios. Following this adventure is a small one-night adventure called The House in the Woods, which is intended for beginners. This takes place in Maine in 1924. The investigators are hired by Alan Devereaux, the friend of a missing person, Professor Geoffrey Winter. Winter had recently recovered from a mental breakdown after a weekend trip to the woods of northern Maine, where he returned raving at great length about the Narragansett Indians and how they had come down from the stars eons ago. Unknown to Alan Devereaux, Winter is being used by Dr. Philip Carstairs from the Green Acres Sanitarium where he resided after his breakdown. The reason Winters had had the breakdown was because he had witnessed several Migo in the woods which had shattered his sanity. Carstairs has been secretly colluding with the Migo in exchange for their technology. Carstairs is convinced that Winter had found an ancient Native American burial site that he knows that the Migo were looking for. Carstairs patched up Winters and packed him off to his holiday home in northern Maine with the intention of sending him directly to the Migo so they could retrieve the information on the site from his brain. Unfortunately, Winter didn't actually know where the site was, so the Migo are still searching the local woods. Devereaux offers to hire the investigators at a rate of $20 a day plus expenses to find out what happened to his friend. If the investigators check out Green Acres Sanitarium, they will discover that Dr. Carstairs is not a regular member of staff and that, unusually, he insisted on dealing with Professor Winter, but that seemed like a good thing as he was cured and released less than a month after. Carstairs is currently away at a conference in Austria. The investigators have several other avenues open to them. Professor Winter's apartment, the Maine police, and the library, for example. They eventually find out the location of Carstairs' vacation home and head out there. The home is a house sitting in a clearing surrounded by dense woods. It's in a good state of repair. If the players search the house, it is mainly uneventful apart from a pack of rats that will attack anyone who investigates the cellar. The outside of the house yields more clues as they find a strange footprint. If the investigators made use of the library, they find the story of a local, Cappy Captain, who reported seeing a flying cow to the police. If the investigators can track him down, he lives near the vacation home, they can question him for information and find out some important clues. After sundown on the first evening, the investigators will encounter the Migo. One of the Migo will be disguised as a human and insist to the investigators that he is Professor Winter and that he is healthy and busy. If the investigators manage to see through the disguise, the imposter will try to escape while the other Migo attack the players. If the investigators manage to drive back or defeat the Migo, no evidence will remain that they were ever there and nobody except Cappy will believe anything has happened. The epilogue to this scenario has the players possibly tracking down the nefarious Dr. Carstairs or being bankrolled by a rich patron for further work. Following this, we have stats for everyone in the adventure and a selection of pre-gen characters, and on the back page, a photo of a selection of Call of Cthulhu miniatures produced by Grenadier. In conclusion, I have mixed feelings about the horrible secrets of Monhegan Island. Over the years, I have been told by many people and read a number of reviews saying that it was absolutely awful. And while I agree that it is no Masks of Nyarlathotep, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. It was written a very long time ago in gaming years, at a more naive period, and this shows. The first adventure is basically The Wicker Man meets Lovecraft. It's seriously short, maybe 2 nights of gaming at best, and the backstory is much more interesting than the scenario itself. The layout's a bit weird. Other than the maps, there's no art until 20 pages into the book, and when you do get it, it's fairly jarring. The thing I would say is that there's nothing inherently awful about the scenarios, but equally nothing really good about them. They serve as an acceptable introduction for new players, but that's all. Currently, this scenario seems to go for, at times, silly prices on eBay and Amazon, but it really isn't worth it. It's for completists and collectors only. Simply put, there are better introductory adventures out there than what you have here. For a more entertaining evening, I would advise purchasing the 1973 version of The Wicker Man and watching that instead. So to the score. While it's not terrible, it's not great either. It has some okay-ish bits, but it's mostly fairly forgettable. I'll give this a 4 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to check out my other reviews. Bud out.